Welcome, and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Dave Zukowski. He's the Director of Defense Solutions at Akamai. Dave, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, no problem. Good to be here.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is digital always has some sort of buzzword going around. I think right now it's digital transformation. So, could you explain what that is, and do organizations really understand what it is when they are talking about digital transformation?
Yeah, and good point. Just like every other buzzword bingo that's out there, DevSecOps, Agile, Zero Trust, it's one of those overloaded terms that people kind of take for their own purposes. But at the end of the day, digital transformation is really recognizing the kind of the trifecta in your organization, the people, the processes, the tools, and putting that all together and enabling it in a more digital and less manpower intensive way. Like how can you leverage technology to make your business better, to bring better value to your customers? And the important part of that kind of definition or description is that it's the technology is part of the solution. It's an enabler, but you have to focus on all three aspects. If you just focus on technology and ignore your people and your processes, you're probably doomed for failure.
So can you give us a good example of who might be doing this, in the best way?
There's actually a really good example commercially that I think has some good tangential, overlaps with what we do in the Defense Department and the federal government. If you look at Carrier, they're a manufacturer of HVAC. Part of their digital transformation was understanding, hey, we've got all these machines out there, we've got all these, building facility managers of varying levels of experience and sophistication when it comes to managing the equipment. How can we use our products and technology and processes within our sales and our maintenance fleets to better help them? So they built in a lot of IoT sensors and communications, and put a lot of software behind how those machines interact with home offices, with the facility managers, so that you can see trends in the HVAC. You can see when parts are going bad. You can proactively forecast maintenance and things. And when you put all that together, they're lowering their help desk footprint because they don't need as many calls to come in. They're streamlining their part ordering because the machine itself is ordering parts it needs for itself, right? So that's where that whole kind of kit and caboodle of people, processes, and tools come in. Is they're lowering the burden on the customer to understand the equipment. They're enabling them to get equipment repairs and things done faster. They're also telling them, where machines are being used inefficiently or most efficiently, and helping them get through that. If you were to kind of take that example and look at, the United States Air Force, for example, with jets, and downfield equipment, we have to recruit and retain talent and send them all over the world. If we can minimize the amount of highly trained airmen we have to deploy on any given basis because the jets themselves are talking to us and telling us what they need, we can put less people in the field and have more people basically home CONUS kind of scouring the information, looking for things, managing the logistics of the parts. It becomes a force multiplier. And again, that's part of that people, processes, and tools. We can keep people home. We can streamline our processes to send parts downrange proactively, watching as a jet gets closer to needed repairs, and basically just empower our force to be better and more effective as we go forward.
So in order to get to what sounds like something that could be very helpful for agencies and for companies, what do organizations need to keep in mind in order to get to this digital transformation stage and get to their end state?
So that's probably my favorite question. Outcomes matter, right? Too often today, and I guarantee you guys have seen it too. If before I even ask the question, people are telling you Kubernetes in the cloud is the answer to whatever the problem is, right? That's not the case. It might be a good answer, right? But we have to understand the requirements and the outcomes we're after. And back to that example, if I'm flying jets in the desert, the outcome is maximizing my repair crews, minimizing parts I need on station because some of them will never be used in repairs. All those mission outcomes are what's important. And then once we understand that mission outcome and that requirement set and the processes and people that already go into doing that work, then we can kind of take all that and say, okay, what technology do we already have? What parts do we already have? What processes can we improve on? And then we can go say, okay, here are our gaps. Here's where we think digital transformation will help. And then these are the technologies we'll use to do it. I picked on Kubernetes for a second, just because, again, it's one of those buzzwords. Everybody's out there thinking it's the magic bullet to solving all the problems. Something like that airplane example, you could theoretically get a bunch of sensor data into something in the Azure cloud and use Power BI, for instance, to give you data insight. That is a product choice we would make based on an outcome that also minimizes the people we need to maintain the technology itself. So having that holistic picture and understanding really the outcomes that they're driving and the things they want to streamline and make better, and again, get those force multipliers, is really where we kind of get the biggest bang for the buck.
So if organizations are facing, a directive to make them do this digital transformation, what might they need to keep in mind to ensure that they can make these changes? What advice would you give them?
Ask themselves why, right? Like, say, why are we doing this? And then I think once you understand the mission imperative of why you want to do something and why the directive is there. And again, to go back to the example, driving digital transformation for fleet maintenance is important because we have limited people. We have, an aging workforce in some ways. We want to maximize the intelligence and the people capital we have to go do the work where the work needs to be done. So, minimizing the amount of, call it, unnecessary or medial work that those people have to do, let them focus on the more important things. So asking yourself why and understanding the imperative behind the directive, and then not treating it as just, you need to put a shiny new interface on something you're already doing. You really need to focus on that outcome, will help organizations ground themselves in what should be a digital transformation reality. How do we make things better?
And you mentioned Azure and a couple other cloud options. How important is the cloud for this, and do you need it to be a truly digitally transformed organization?
So the cloud, again, is an enabler. I may or may not need it, and I think over focus on technology at the detriment of people in the processes, or existing investments in things that are already occurring, can lead to negative impact of a digital transformation initiative. As an example, say you've got for this fleet maintenance, Air Force bases all over the world, right? And they've got inventory systems running local at the base because, in the past, they've determined that, hey, speed of light problems and CONUS connections on our networks or disconnected problems when we're in theater cause bandwidth issues or prevent the fleet from doing their work. If we just focused on the cloud and modernized and put everything in the cloud and forgot that those were existing problems, we would maybe have a better overall system, but it would exist in one place. And then all those problems would come back to the forebear and we'd lose connectivity out in the desert or wherever we happen to be operating at the time, right? So understanding those requirements, again, and the outcomes, and looking at all your technology options. Obviously I work for Akamai, so working the edge into your architecture and understanding the cloud plus the edge plus that distributed capability that's all available to these departments, taking a look at that whole picture is really the important takeaway from this whole thing.
And how often are we seeing initiatives built around this digital transformation idea? Is this something that is picking up a lot of speed at this point?
There was a congressional law to go out and do it. And I think a lot of people have used that to start to do some of this stuff. There was a really important feature in that law that, I think it goes to cybersecurity and privacy aspects of this whole thing as well, is we can digitally transform and we have to better our citizens and our customers, but we have to remember that not everybody's going to be able to do this digital work, right? That there might be people in underserved communities that don't have access to the internet that may need to go into an office. So again, that's part of that whole people, processes, and tools. We have to understand the community we serve, the realities of those communities we serve, and build into that whole transformation process potentially multiple paths of execution, right? Like it's one thing to digitally enable like a credit card application system, for instance, and try to eliminate your telephone bank of operators and recorders. But if you're not prepared for the influx of applications that might come by making that more widely available, you could, in essence, be negatively impacting the community you're trying to serve, because now they'll never know when their application is going to get processed. It just goes into this never land of pending. Whereas before, they had a person to talk to. They could call, they would give their information, and by the time they were done, they'd know their application was accepted and being processed. So keeping that trifecta in mind, all those things working together and focusing on that outcome is what they need to do.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for the insights. We really appreciate it.
Anytime. This was fun.
Dave Zukowski is the Director of Defense Solutions at Akamai. I'm your moderator, Scott Massioni, and you're listening to Federal News Network. I'm going to send you back to the studio now for more on the DoD Cloud Exchange.